we're finally back to have her play another Souls game. Many of you were worried that I'd left out Demon's Souls, like the furtive pygmy of the series, so easily forgotten. But Demon's Souls is the progenitor of Dark Souls. It would be a crime to overlook such an important game in the series, and I'm excited for her to experience where things all began. There's just one catch. Unfortunately, we don't have a PS5, but what we do have is a PS3. Actually, my parents have a PS3. It was in my old room, and while we were there for Christmas, we kidnapped it. Someday, maybe we'll have a PS5 and she can play the remake for a fun comparison, but for now, we're sticking to the classic. Besides, it's unique in its own right and deserves to be experienced in its original form. That's enough rambling though. Let me tell you all about how I made my girlfriend play Demon's Souls. One advantage to her playing every Soulsborne game in the series prior to touching the true first Souls game is that she has an idea of what to expect.
Pleased to meet you. Call me Patches.
Oh, I know what to call you.
That meant anytime she encountered any kind of familiarity, she was able to stop and think, okay, that's where that started. This game is the oldest after all.
Ah! There's 3 of them! And one of them looks like Havel!
That guy doesn't look like Havel. Havel looks like that guy. You gotta respect the age. And at times it shows.
Oh my god. I'm getting like PTSD from texting in middle school.
She really impressed me with how she was able to identify some of the connecting threads originating in this game that are present in the later games.
Storm Ruler? I thought that was for killing giants. Not mana rays.
It's not even things as simple as sound effects or weapon designs, but like Moongrass feeling similar to Blood Vials in Bloodborne, or Spirit Form feeling familiar to Wounding in Dark Souls 2.
I think I'm gonna be spending most of this game with half health. I think I just gotta accept that.
The familiarity is comforting, and I think it really pulls back the curtain on the rest of the series. It's a pretty fun and unique way to experience Demon's Souls, and it's all thanks to the chaotic order she's played these games in.
I hear another one somewhere. What the hell? Is that the brain of Mensis?
I did my best to explain to her that going into this game was like drinking water from the source. Plenty of things she's come to love from this series have their roots in Demon's Souls. Consequently, plenty of mechanics she's learned to hate from the different Souls games also trace back to Demon's Souls.
Oh my god. I can't even roll? Every game is its poison swamp.
Harking back to her adventures in Bloodborne, one of her biggest gripes was about blood vials. She was pretty new to the series during her first playthrough, so running out of vials and having to farm for new ones was a major roadblock. She actually got so frustrated that I had to step in and collect the vials for her so she could make more attempts at the first boss. Fortunately, gone are those days, and she's more than capable of collecting her own grass.
New sword, who dis? Oh yeah. Fisting pigs just got cooler.
Not only is grass not hard to come by, but there's plenty of different flavors too. Aside from farming them off of enemies, there's no shortage of vendors happy to sell it throughout Boletaria.
Hello! We're buds.
She's gotten a lot better at carrying her soul since the Bloodborne days, so anything that didn't get spent on leveling got turned into grass. Just be careful not to get trigger happy around the merchants.
Wait, no! Oh! I accidentally hit my friend.
She explained to me that Moongrass reminded her less of blood vials and more of life gems from Dark Souls 2. She really liked that in both games she could choose to heal small amounts of chip damage as opposed to committing to a full sip of Estus. I'll never forget the way she infamously removed Estus from her hotbar in that DS2 playthrough, but she really could have benefited from some of that here. Plenty of her deaths during encounters and boss fights can be blamed on her fiddling around with the hotbar. Nothing like scrolling through 4 different types of grass and whatever jump that got picked up along the way in the middle of a tough fight. In her defense, it's a bit of a pain having to reorganize it every time you find a new consumable since it goes straight to the bar.
I got way too much bullshit on my bar.
I have to talk about Crescent Moongrass now. She built herself a strategy where she'd almost exclusively use Crescent Moongrass during her exploring, and then save all the other kinds of grass for boss fights.
Shit. Ugh, now I'm poisoned and have the plague. This is wasting all my grass.
On paper, that's not a bad way to go about it, and I think I followed a similar principle where I tried to save my best grass for the toughest encounters too. Where the problem was that she'd be super stingy about it. She'd be in the middle of the fight of her life with a boss like Flame Lurker, the Man-Eaters, and I'd watch her finally find a window to heal and then recover like 1/10 of her health bar. God, just use the better grass. It was like something in her was hardwired to not use the good grass until she was completely out of the weak stuff. Thankfully, the natural course of the game led to Crescent grass being something she found less and less. And before you knew it, the invisible hand of gaming had her munching the half moon grass.
Yeah! Does this wear off? I'm fuzzy! Ah! Oh my god, somebody help me! Where the fuck is the Arkstone?
Another one of the biggest changes she had to wrap her head around was the lack of bonfires.
Is this a bonfire?
No, that's just a fire.
For those that don't know, in Demon Souls, all you get is the starting Archstone, or bonfire, and then the ones that appear after defeating a boss. The game's darker than ever, and there are plenty of different paths to take and goodies to find, so it's easy to get lost.
I've got plenty of ways.
Okay, dude, I did not come all this way to buy bullshit.
Of course, there are plenty of shortcuts that you can open up to make your life easier, but I won't sugarcoat it. There are quite a few gnarly runs in this game. It's one thing to make that run when you're playing on your own, but when you're watching a girlfriend, it gets maddening.
Oh my god. This boss run sucks.
This game in particular, I noticed she had a hard time dying on the way to the bosses. In previous titles, her worst nightmare was getting hit on the way to the fog wall because it meant she had to waste a precious Estus sip on something other than the boss. In this game, more than half of her attempts at a boss ended before they started, with her getting mowed down by enemies or falling victim to gravity.
This game as unfair as it feels.
I think it's fair to say she's developed a bit of a taste for Souls games, and in doing so has become a bit of a snob about certain things. It's always hilarious to me to hear nitpick things like some kind of games critic. I always have to play devil's advocate since it's just the two of us and no one else is there to defend a game, but it's usually all in good fun.
Why does the regain souls thing take up the entire screen? Like, did they not think of that?
One thing that was mostly foreign to her was the idea of world tendency. The closest relative to this I can think of is collecting insight in Bloodborne, but even that seems a little bit of a stretch. I'm not sure if it's ever explicitly stated to how it works, but she went through a majority of the game never realizing it was hurting her.
I guess it takes grass to make grass.
What I mean is that she finished Boletaria Palace last out of all the areas. Just the walk to the boss was aggravating her to no end. She was always complaining how the enemies were able to one-shot her even though it was the first area. And that's when I sat down to watch her and realized she was playing with pure black world tendency.
Jeez. This guy hits so hard.
So it turns out whenever she beat a boss, she'd go back to the Tower Knight Archstone to farm grass. The thing is, in this game, resetting the enemies requires you to warp back to the Nexus since you can't just sit and rest like a traditional bonfire. So rather than make the run back and warp, she would finish trading with the merchant and then get killed by the dragon. All those human deaths added up, and it led to a very difficult run to the boss fog.
Is there really like no shortcut to get back up here?
It would be a crime not to address her biggest villain of all, encumbrance. All the Souls games deal with equipment load to some extent, and she knows the difference between light roll, mid roll, and heavy roll. However, this game does it different from any of the others. It's the only one that dictates how many items you can carry at a time.
Whoa. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm in the middle of a boss fight. Now I gotta drop shit.
Leaving things at Stockpiled Thomas isn't necessarily a hard thing to do, but only if you remember to actually do it. Nothing takes the wind out of your sails like getting knee-deep into a new area and then not being able to pick up any of the items you find. I could genuinely feel the pain in her eyes when she was out exploring and that menu would pop up.
Are you serious? I can't even pick up the boss soul. What the hell?
Ironically, her playstyle of finding and using the heaviest weapon she could was completely antithetical to her loot goblin tendencies. In order to carry more stuff, she'd have been better off using a smaller sword. So she got caught deciding if it was worth running back and forth to the stockpile every 5 minutes in order to use her fun weapons or not.
Honestly, just take all my shit.
She went a lot harder into endurance than usual because she just wanted to be able to carry things. But all the points in the world aren't going to change the fact that that sword weighs a whopping 20.
Oh, shit. Okay. Male only? I just dropped all my shit for this. Where's the female-only armor?
Demon Souls is cool because it gives you a lot of freedom to choose which order you want to tackle things in. Each of the 5 Arkstones are open for exploration, and it's up to you whether you want to complete them in order or switch after each boss fight. Her initial approach was to test each area and get a lay of the land, although after a while she started to play more like a traditional Dark Souls game and just tackle entire Archstones head-on until she defeated the Archdemon.
walk here was harder than the boss.
If Dark Souls has taught her anything, it's not to shy away from a hurdle, but to stick with it and keep trying until you find a way to beat it. It was clear when she died to the Penetrator but announced it seemed like a pretty fair boss, she was just gonna stay and figure out his mechanics, or die trying.
Oh. So, he has a grab attack.
In Demon's Souls, there was a lot of experimentation in the boss fights, and you can tell that they were trying to nail down a way to make them challenging but still fun. Even though gimmick boss fights aren't usually the favorites in their respective titles, Demon's Souls isn't afraid to try anything.
Okay. What am I doing? Like, can I just, like, leave? I'm leaving the fog wall. And I'm not really sure what's going on.
A lot of the gimmicks in this one permeate the future games, and you gotta give them credit for trying some crazy stuff. She definitely wasn't expecting to fight a blind boss, or one that could lower her soul level. It was also fun for her to see that FromSoft was still trying to make player invasion boss fights and set-piece dragon encounters fun all those years ago.
You killed it very well. Do as you like.
Oh, jeez. Okay. I guess the gimmick of this boss fight is guilt tripping.
Due to a lot of these more gimmicky fights, she didn't just blow through the game her usual way. What it did was it brought out some interesting changes in her playstyle. For one thing, it was funny that she actually picked up a shield for the first time since probably Dark Souls 1. Ever since she learned to go without it in Yharnam, she turned her back on them. But desperate times call for desperate measures.
The shield is awesome. I'm sorry I ever doubted you.
It was funny to see the game humble her a bit, because lately she's been chewing through these games like candy. I wasn't sure what to expect going into this, but I'm pretty surprised at how quickly Demon's Souls knocked her down a few pegs. She still handled the game well, but we had quite a few more late night boss attempts than we've had in a long time.
Oh my god, are you kidding me? Oh, why did they lower me back down? Oh my god. Now I have to go back up. Ugh, this elevator takes forever. Okay. Remind me to pee at the Arkstone next time.
Really and truly, once you found a weapon you like in these games, the world is your oyster. An unfortunate side effect of powering through the Arkstones from start to finish in numerical order was that the 4th and 5th ones were an absolute cakewalk. The bosses weren't ever going to be quite as difficult as some of the standouts from the earlier Arkstones, but the two of us discussed how it would be a completely different game if she chose to go through them in reverse order, which really speaks to the replayability of Demon's Souls.
Crescent Moongrass? Don't insult me.
Overall, it was a mixed bag of mostly fun things. Obviously, some decisions felt a little out there at times, but that's to be expected. I kept having a reminder that this is the original game. So if there's a mechanic that sucks and you don't recognize it from the other games, it means they figured out it sucked too.
Soul level what the fuck? What do you mean my soul level drained?
No one liked not being able to pick up goodies, so they tossed the idea out. De-leveling the player is total BS, and it never happened again. And yes, I agree. It's a shame dogs didn't get the same treatment.
These are the worst dogs in any Souls game.
Love it or hate it, no matter what, you have to admire the foundation Demon's Souls laid for all its successors. It played a major role in creating a completely new genre of games that the two of us have come to know and love. And for that alone, it deserves our respect. She can finally say she's played them all, but don't let that fool you. She's got plenty left to do. It's safe to say there's a demon inside her, and only souls can touch the darkness within.